everyone. I'm Colleen, and I am back for another live stream brought to you, of course, by the awesome people over at Princess Dental Staffing. You may notice today that we're doing our live stream on Thursday. Normally, we do these on Wednesdays. Normally, every Wednesday, we're bringing you a new topic that talks about starting and or maintaining your career in the dental industry. Okay, so this week we're doing it on Thursday, but next week we're going to go back to Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central, noon Mountain Standard Time, and 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Okay. So this week is a little bit strange, but that's totally fine. We're bringing you a new topic. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about 5 tips for interviewing potential dental employees. But before I jump into that, I just want to remind you guys to be sure to check out Princess Dental Staffing's website at princessdentalstaffing.com, where you can check out their blog, get more information on some of the topics that we're bringing you. And it's also super, super easy to create a profile and start searching for jobs. Okay. So if you like the content we're bringing you, be sure to like our video. If you don't want to miss out on future streams, be sure to subscribe to our channel or follow our page. And if you have any thoughts, insights, comments, questions, anything on any of the topics that we're bringing you, be sure to comment them below. If you don't get to comment or ask your question when the stream is live, of course we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Okay. So, like I said, today we are talking about 5 tips for interviewing potential dental employees. So this stream, this topic is going to be for our interviewers, our office managers, our leaders in the dental industry. Okay, making those decisions on who to hire. So we're going to be talking about the interview process and giving you some tips. So let's go ahead and jump into our tips. Tip number 1 is to use your job description as a guide when you are thinking about your interview questions. Okay, and this is really, I think this is really great advice, because this is not only going to help you come up with some really good interview questions, but it's also going to make sure that you stay on topic and on track and only asking those questions that are job related in the interview. Okay, so if you have an actual written job description, which by the way, I always recommend that you do. So if you have one, make sure you take out the job description of the position that you're trying to fill, read through it, and read through like all of the tasks and responsibilities, and make sure you write down some of the skills needed in order to do those tasks well. Okay, so you can they can be technical or hard skills, they can be soft skills. You're likely going to have a pretty good list of both. So make sure that you write down those skills, and then you can come up with questions based on those skills so that you can ask the interviewee specifically about those skills. Okay, so then you have a better idea of how well they're going to perform in the job, right? How well they're going to perform the essential job tasks and duties and responsibilities. Okay, so let's say, for example, one of your major skills is communication skills, right? The soft skill. But let's say communication is super, super important in carrying out all the duties and responsibilities of this position. You might ask something like, how do you define your communication skills? Or how do you define communication skills? You might also say, can you give me an example of a time when your communication skills helped you in the workplace? You might ask, how do you exemplify communication in the workplace? So those are all some really great options and really great questions to ask an interviewee about their communication skills and get a better idea of how well they can communicate, since it is something that is very important in completing those tasks and responsibilities. Hello, Sahar. Saw your comment. Okay, so that's tip number 1, okay? Tip number 2 is do an initial phone screen, okay? So before you do the in-person interview, make sure you do a quick phone screen. It really doesn't have to be, more than 10 or 15 minutes, but doing a phone screen kind of helps narrow down your applicant pool just a little bit more, okay? So you can hopefully it does. If you have a great group of applicants, it might not, but it can help you kind of whittle down how many people you're going to interview, okay? And that way you make better use of your time if you can kind of narrow down that applicant pool on the front end for interviews. Then that's less time that you're going to have to spend later, okay? So you might call them up. And like I said, normally like a 10 or 15-minute interview, I do recommend scheduling them just to make sure that, they're available and you're available at that time. And just, doing a quick little phone interview and just asking some very brief, broad questions that give you a better sense of their skills, again, based on that job description and the tasks and responsibilities, right? And just give you a little bit more insight into their skills. And that way you can kind of pull from that your top candidates based on those phone interviews and those phone screens, okay? Additionally, if you schedule the phone screen and then they don't show up for the phone screen, or they're not available for the phone screen, that's likely one less interview you have to do, because if they didn't show up for the phone screen, they might not have shown up for the interview as well. So that's actually less time that you have to spend interviewing, right? Okay. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is prepare well for each individual interview ahead of time. Make sure you do your homework ahead of time. And that way, when you're actually in the interview and you know what questions you want to ask, you have the time to ask them, and to ask them on the front end. So, definitely have your interview questions ahead of time, but also make sure for each individual applicant that you're looking at their resume or their application, or both, whatever they provided. Make sure you're looking at both of them, and that you're making making notes. If there's something that's not quite clear in their resume, or there's something you want a little bit more information on, make sure to make a note and write down, what you want to ask them about. Okay. Yeah, so you definitely want to make sure that you have those questions beforehand, and that way you're not trying to scramble and, read the resume while you're asking, and you don't have those like long periods of silence. And you also don't forget to ask them later, okay? Some of these questions might determine, who you want to hire as opposed to who you don't. So make sure you ask all the questions that you can. You only have a limited amount of time, remember. So preparation is key here, okay? So that is tip number 3. Tip number 4 is create possible scenarios and see how the candidate will handle them. Sorry, real quick, have a comment coming in. Preparing is key. Having notes on applicants is a good idea. Yeah, Sahar, it's a really good idea. Like I said, you only have a limited amount of time, and if you're not prepared for the interview, even as the interviewer, you're going to spend a lot of time kind of scrambling, reading around in their resume, or you might not get to ask a really important question that you'd really like the answer to, okay? And it just kind of makes you look like you're not very well prepared, which doesn't reflect well on the interviewee either. So preparation, always a good idea, okay? So tip number 4 is creating possible scenarios and see how the candidates will handle them. So asking these sort of scenario questions, these task-based questions, okay? So those are some other like interview questions that you can actually come up with. Okay. So, asking during an interview, giving the candidate a possible scenario, one that is likely to happen. Okay. Definitely pick one that is absolutely likely to happen. And if you're not quite sure, kind of what to do, ask some of your current employees, what's the scenario that you face on a regular basis, that you think is really, really important for this new hire to be able to handle, okay? What kind of skills do they need to have in order to handle what you handle on a regular basis? So you can actually ask, you can also Google as well, but you can also, a really great resource are your current employees. Go ahead and ask them, hey, what is a scenario that you deal with on a regular basis, or at least on a semi-regular basis, that is going to be important for this new hire to be able to handle well, and is a little bit difficult and requires some skill in that area. So that's actually a really good idea as well. So make sure when you are crafting these questions, make sure you create the scenario and then the task that's assigned to them, or the tasks, plural, that are assigned to that candidate, so that they have all of the information in the interview and they can thoroughly answer the question. Because it does, scenario-based questions are a really great idea, because it shows the critical thinking and problem solving skills of the applicant, of the candidate. Okay. So scenarios, especially if they're ones that they are likely to encounter in the position that you have available, always a great thing to ask candidates. Okay. And tip number 5, make sure you take notes in the interview, and then make sure, if you have time at the end of the interview, make sure you come back to anything that you wanted or that you needed further clarification on. Okay. So, and this is really important, especially if you have more than one interviewer. So, if you're the only interviewer, it's still important to kind of take your notes. But if you have more than one interviewer, you're definitely going to want to take good notes, because, you can't always stop in the middle of the interview and ask questions. You might be interrupting one of your other interviewers, right? So make sure that you take notes. And then it's also really good to be able to, especially if you have other interviewers that you're conducting the interview with, it's really good to be able to compare notes later and, kind of see, what they thought or what they got from the interview, and how it compares with what you got from the interview. And then also, it's always good to take notes anyway, just because, I am a big offender in this area. I am definitely the person who says, no need to write that down, I'll remember it later. And that's the biggest lie I tell myself. I don't know about you, but that is the absolute biggest lie I tell myself. I don't need to write it down, I will remember. And then, lo and behold, I'm in the grocery store and then I can't remember what I even came in for. Happens every time. So make sure you are writing down, especially if you have interviews back to back to back to back. They might start to blur together after a while, depending on how many candidates you're interviewing. So make sure you take good notes as much as possible. Make sure you have, your own shorthand that you remember and will be able to remember later. And, make sure, you write down during the interview, you write down any questions of anything you want further clarification on, things you kind of want to revisit if there's time at the end of the interview. Also, really good idea to write down specific details, exact numbers, dates, and things of that nature, and confirm them later at the end of the interview with the candidates. Okay. So, taking notes, also really, really good tip in, in completing your interviews. And, and I think, when you implement a lot of these tips, I think it'll really help you save time and really make the most of your interview time. A lot of interviews, like I said, you do what, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending, on the level of the job opening, you might even do 45 to an hour, it just depends. But you want to make sure, a lot of the times you're limited in time, especially if you're doing back-to-back interviews and you've cleared your schedule for these 1 day or 2 days to do these interviews. You want to make sure that you're maximizing your time and maximizing what you get out of the interview so you can make an even more informed decision, so you can make the best decision possible for you and your office and your company. Okay. So just kind of a summation, let's kind of go over those tips again. Number 1, use your job description as a guide for your interview questions. Okay, make sure you read that job description, write down those skills that are just so necessary and quintessential in doing the job, and then write questions based on that. You can also Google a lot of questions as well, Google a lot of interview questions. Okay. Tip number 2 was doing an initial phone screen to kind of screen out some of the other ones that maybe, just aren't going to be a good fit. So you can go ahead and screen them out on the front end. It's just about investing a little bit more time beforehand so that you don't have to spend too much time later doing interviews with people that you don't necessarily think are going to be a very good fit. Okay. Tip number 3, prepare well for each individual interview ahead of time. Okay. Read through their resume, their application cover letter, all of their application documents, essentially, and make sure you write down any questions or anything you want clarification on, or anything specific that you want to ask this candidate about. Number 4, create possible scenarios and see how the candidate will handle them. So scenario questions, really good idea, especially if they are scenarios that they are likely to encounter if hired for this position. And number 5, taking notes during the interview so you can refer back to them later, so you can report on them later, so you can confer with other interviewers later about about what you gleaned from the interview, and also to be able to, if you have time at the end of the interview, to go ahead and ask those questions that you want more clarification on from the candidate. Okay. So those are our 5 tips for interviewing your potential new dental employees. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found it insightful, and it gave you some really good information. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, be sure to comment them below, and we will get back to them as soon as possible. Thank you for being here with me today, everyone. I know we changed it up a little bit this week, but we will be back next week on Wednesday, regular time, with a new topic to discuss and to help guide you in your dental career. Okay, so thanks for being here with me. I will see you next week. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. I will see you soon. Have a great week. Bye.